So welcome back, everybody. This is the last week of class. I feel like 5 weeks always seems like a long time for a class, and then it's like it blows by really quickly. So maybe you felt the same way. Maybe it dragged on forever. I don't know. We're going to do a little bit of just like, I've got a little lecture on like sort of next steps if you're interested in continuing this work. And then we're going to do mostly show and tell for today. So I'm really excited to see everybody's work again. You know, this should be like pretty low key. You'll share your screen and do a little like show and tell demo, and then if people have feedback, comments, we can chat for a little bit. Sound good? Cool. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll start our final lecture for the day. All right, so yeah, so again, just gonna do a keep learning sort of like next steps for folks, and then we'll do show and tell. This is sort of the main class that I teach through SSHH. There are other courses that I teach as well, sort of solo by myself and also with a co-teacher by the name of Leah Coleman. So we've sort of been teaching them since the beginning of the year. And then the pandemic happened and it made sense to keep teaching them more. So I do have a bunch of other courses. This is sort of like my intro course, and it tends to be mostly like using Runway. But if you're interested in sort of like the next step, or if you have coding experience, there's lots of opportunities to learn other things. So first off, I would probably say this is like the next best thing outside after Runway. Maybe you've noticed, but like I find that everyone has about a 3 to 4 weeks of like fun in Runway, and then you sort of like feel like you're maybe hitting against a wall where like you're sort of hitting, oh, I either have to train my own models and spend lots of money, or you know, I've found all the models that I find are fun inside of Runway, and what do I do next? So my next recommendation after this is, I just finished up this class called ML Art with Colab. You can go ahead and if you just click on this link, it'll just take you to a page where, let's see, where are we here? Yeah, so this is a course that I just finished up like I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And you're welcome to like go through here. All the slides and videos are here as well. So again, after all my courses are done, videos go up on YouTube, and it's sort of like the freemium version where like you don't get access to me or ask questions of me, but you can just watch videos of me teaching other people, which is not the most exciting thing, but it is a thing. So this is a course on Colab. Colab is a product from Google that allows you to sort of do stuff you can do in Runway, but it's free, so that's pretty nice. And two, there's generally like a wider range of things you can do inside of Colab. You can do training and generate video, like lots of other things. The difference is that whereas Runway has like a nice, really nice like GUI interface, this one uses basic commands that you run through an interface that is mostly like text-based. So this is what Colab looks like. If you're familiar with Jupyter notebooks, if you've ever worked in data science stuff, this is basically like it's this funky mix of being able to do code directly in like a coding environment, but also being able to run bash scripts directly in an environment. So it's pretty cool. It definitely requires a little bit of like next step of knowledge in terms of like being able to read through some code. But the truth is, most of the stuff that I cover in that class, you can just sort of walk through. You can basically just run these cells one at a time. And you can sort of like play with stuff. So that's probably what I would recommend next for folks if you're really interested in doing a next step sort of thing. It is pretty like analogous to Runway. In fact, you'll find many of the notebooks that I show folks are like things you can also do in Runway, and you can sort of see the difference and see how you feel. But it covers sort of a different range of things. So if you're interested, I would recommend checking that out. This is just like a range of other courses that you're welcome to check out from me. There's also one called AI 2.1. This was actually the before Runway got really good. I actually taught this class through SSHH, and it was it's a little bit more advanced in terms of like you need to be able to run a server, like run commands on a command line. So Runway ended up being simpler for most folks just because it has a GUI built into it. But if you're interested, this is a course that like covers a little bit of a wider range of things. It covers a lot more training in terms of being able to do style transfer, pix-to-pix, CycleGAN. It does cover StyleGAN, and it's probably up to date or fairly up to date. So this is a good class to watch if you're like sort of used to this format. It's a lot more lectures, but with some demo videos and things as well. So this is sort of like the first step into like setting up your own server and that sort of thing. So it's a little more advanced than Runway, and it will generally cost you a lot more money. These servers generally run anywhere from about, I think the one I'm teaching on in this class is like 75 cents an hour to run. You can turn it on and off whenever you're ready to go. So like price is fairly comparable to Runway, but you have a little bit more control over things. So you'll want to watch that and like sort of get set up before you like dive into things. Another course I finished maybe a couple months ago is a StyleGAN deep dive. So if you really got into StyleGAN, this was a 5-week class all about StyleGAN and some things you can do outside of Runway that are you have a little bit more ability to do different things outside of Runway than you do inside Runway, right? So inside Runway, you're pretty limited to what tools they make available to you. Here, it's really like what kind of things can you code? So if you like found the P5JS stuff exciting, like this will be kind of a good course for you. This is 5 weeks, so there's a ton of information. This course uses Paperspace, which is a pretty nice UI for setting up your own servers. This class uses GCP, which is not as fun, but I believe it's a little bit more price friendly. I don't know. It's fairly comparable, but GCP is like a little bit more annoying to get set up if you're interested in it. You can do a lot of stuff with this. You can also do some StyleGAN training inside of Colab. It's kind of annoying the way it's set up in that you have to like sort of Colab will turn off every 10 hours and you have to like restart it and then reset up your command and run it again. So it can be a little bit annoying in that path, but it's free. So it's like sort of have like the Runway, which is cheapish, but like it's like kind of expensive, but it is a nice interface. Then you've got Colab, which is free, but a little bit more annoying to get set up and running. And then you've got these other tools, which are very expensive, but you have like full control over them. So you sort of have like a range of things. So those are sort of the courses that are available now. I am teaching another course at the end, that's when it starts, and that'll be a 3-week class purely on StyleGAN training. So this will be just entirely, we'll do 3 weeks of just training using different models and techniques. I bring that up because the truth is the Runway StyleGAN training isn't as good as it could be. They're now sort of maybe 2 versions behind where I would want them to be. Not to blame them or anything, it's just to say like StyleGAN stuff updates rather quickly. So if you want to get the latest and greatest, I definitely recommend this. One thing that I can show you now is, so this is, I trained that model, if you remember that Michelle Heslop model, I trained that on using this new technique. And I don't know if you remember what the other one looked like. We can look at it inside Runway, but this is like far, far better in terms of quality. It still looks like kind of bad in the sense that it doesn't look like realistically like what the other images look like, but it's like extremely improved. And there's sort of 2 reasons for that. One is I'm using a slightly different training structure, one that includes like a couple latest and greatest techniques. And I also trained it for a lot longer. So this was probably trained for about a week on a single GPU. So this was a lot longer in terms of training time than you can get out of Runway. So you end up with a much better sort of solution in the end. So you know, this would probably have cost you like $400 to run inside a Runway. Actually, probably not, yeah, maybe around that much. It would have been very, very expensive to run this in Runway. But now I've gotten to a place where I'm like pretty advanced in like I have a server and everything set up for myself here at my apartment. So you know, this is sort of where you can be, and this is sort of the stuff I'll be teaching in that class. So if you're interested in like sort of the advanced stuff, this is what we'll be covering in that class. We'll also be covering there's a concept of having classes or labels within your data set. So let's say, whereas if you had 5 different cats, like 5 different Instagram cats, and you were training them all on the same StyleGAN model in Runway, they would kind of like try to merge them all together. There's a technique where you can actually separate them out and say this image is an image of Bone Bone, this image is an image of Hamilton, and it can sort of learn all of the features it needs to learn across all of the cats, but then it can also learn features separated out for each of those. So we'll be covering like sort of those 3 topics in that class. So if you're interested in that, I believe I have 2 or 3 spots still open for that class. Most of my classes do sell out by the end. So if you're interested, I would probably recommend checking out this week. The link is here if you're interested in it. And that class is $150. So that covers sort of like all of my classes. If you are interested in checking out some other things that are related to ML art, there are not a lot of videos or even tutorials these days, but there are a couple of good ones that I recommend checking out if you're interested. The first is Runway does have their own YouTube channel, and they do a bunch of videos on there. And they tend to add like one like every couple weeks. So they will cover some topics that I haven't covered in this class. So if you're interested in like text training, or maybe some of the other models you've seen in there that I didn't really go into deep detail in, Runway will usually cover those in their YouTube videos. And Gene Kogan, who I will talk about in his courses next, he's like the person who does all the videos for them. So pretty knowledgeable, like pretty good. They're fairly short. I think each one is like 10 to 15 minutes long. So you can sort of take them at the pace you want. ML for Art is Gene Kogan's GitHub repo, as well as like a website of a bunch of his content. I would say Gene was like probably one of the original people like really teaching this stuff. I learned a ton from him. And I think there's just like a bunch of really cool things. I just now noticed he has a new class up, which I have not seen. I will probably be checking that out probably tonight still. This neural aesthetic class was, I believe, 10 classes of lectures and things. It's really, really good. You will learn a ton from this. You'll learn sort of a lot more like the next level of like, so we sort of like played at this level, and you'll learn a little bit more about sort of like what goes on behind the scenes. So I definitely recommend this. He also has a bunch of guides, which are mostly like notebooks you could run in Colab. He has a bunch of demos. He just has a bunch of things in here, and he covers a much wider range of things than I have in this class. So if you're really interested in digging in really deep into machine learning art, I can definitely recommend Gene's work. And I know that this was a little quiet for maybe a year or two, but I know that he's planning to like reduce, to like make a bunch of new materials, as well as update a lot of this stuff, because the truth is in machine learning world, if things are a year or two old, that means they're like light years out of date, which is kind of scary. But I would say a lot of this stuff changes every 3 to 6 months. StyleGAN, I would say every 6 months there's a new version of it or someone has improved it. And so it moves relatively quickly. So even when I teach these classes, I teach usually these like once a quarter or once every 2 months. And pretty much every time I do it, I have something new to cover. So, you know, a lot of stuff moves quickly, and these are sort of some good resources to keep an eye on. Another one, if you're not familiar with Dan Schiffman, Dan Schiffman runs a YouTube channel called Coding Train, and he has like a very broad perspective. It's like a lot of, if you were interested in P5, he has a ton of P5 content. So if you want to learn stuff on that level, like Dan has a really great, very fun, pretty wacky, he just has a really interesting sort of personality, very fun, very lighthearted. If you're like used to like engineering or coding demos where they're like really boring people, Dan is not that. So it's a fun channel to check out. Definitely recommend it. He has some classes devoted to machine learning. Some are really basic machine learning. Some are with a tool called ML5, which is sort of the P5 equivalent for machine learning. So you can do some web demos. They're pretty bare bones, but they do work fairly well if you're interested in it. And then he also has some other like stuff that works with Runway. So there's a bunch of materials in there that I would recommend checking out. Yeah, so those are probably like the 3 like ML art resources that I can recommend for folks. If you're interested in non-machine learning things, or just want to learn a little bit more about machine learning as a whole, I sort of recommend that these 3 or 4 pieces. Fast AI is a series of videos from 2 professors in San Francisco, but they like have a really good approach in that it's pretty straightforward, and like they sort of work in this class where you like sort of learn by making things. So it's a pretty great series. I've learned a lot from it. It is pretty deep. I think there's like 20 videos, and each video is like 3 hours long, because they're really like lecture hall sort of materials. So there's a lot there, but I definitely recommend checking it out. You will definitely want to go, like, you'll probably watch every video like 3 times, like, because they're pretty dense, but they are like very, very good. Okay, so MIT Deep Learning, this is actually I really like these videos. They're purely lecture based, and they, unlike other deep learning materials, are not like super math heavy. So these are like more like sort of general lectures about deep learning and how they work and that sort of thing. Toward the end, they get like sort of about vision, and I think one of like the lead researchers at NVIDIA, shows off a bunch of stuff that they've been making. So some really cool stuff there, pretty accessible, which is great. Andrew Ng's Coursera course is pretty much like I think it's like the most popular machine learning course on the internet today. Andrew Ng, I believe, is a Stanford person. So Stanford and MIT are, of course, like the big machine learning schools because they're big technology schools. Andrew Ng is like one of the more well-known machine learning people, artificial intelligence people. His Coursera course is like a lot of math, but if you're really interested in digging into that, you can sort of start there and figure that out. If you are not a video person, my favorite like deep learning stuff to play with is this book by Francois Chalot. Francois is like probably one of like the better people in terms of deep learning and making it accessible to other folks. He created a thing called Keras, which is like a framework that sits on top of a lot of other machine learning layers. This book is pretty accessible, and there's also like really decent code examples. I just find that he's like he's very clear, and he's very helpful in explaining things in a way that like people without PhDs in math can understand, which is like one of the big problems with most machine learning stuff is they like are like the first thing to do is like, cool, so you know linear algebra, right? Or you know like all these other things, and they like, you sort of feel like you're stuck already. You have to like go learn like 4 years of math in order to make all this stuff happen. So I find that these three, like this one's maybe a little bit math heavy, but it's still accessible. You know, these is like a good mix of like, for artists like us, I feel like these are accessible things to get started with. So I would recommend checking them out. There are a lot of people like on Twitter who are like, or you know, on the internet that are doing lots of cool stuff. I can definitely recommend like checking out like a list of these names. These are just like a bunch of really good people doing art related things. I've always talked about Gene before. Mario Klingemann is like probably one of like the more well-known sort of artists, people really working with this technology. He's been at the forefront of a lot of different things. You know, I think many of these artists, if you just like click around, you'll see like some really cool work from them and probably get inspired by it. There is this Creative AI newsletter, which is written by Luba Elliott. I believe she's in London, somewhere in Europe, and is like a sort of like every, I think, week or month, there's like a collection of lots of creative AI stuff. So pretty interesting things. In the past, I've had a lot of people ask about machine learning for music or audio, and there are some cool people doing things. That's not really my area of expertise. So I would say like there are probably more people out here than this, and I don't know all of them. But these are some pretty interesting people if you're interested. So definitely just recommend like clicking around, like finding some people. You'll generally see like these people are talking to people or retweeting other people's work. Yeah, so I think that's it. Cool. So also a shameless plug for myself. Obviously, you paid for this class. It is plenty. Your money can go to many other good places. But if you do feel like continuing working with me or supporting my work, there's a couple different places you can do that. I have both a Patreon as well as a YouTube membership. With those, you get discounts for future classes, depending on what monthly, percentage you're giving me as a member. You also get like discounts in my store, which has prints as well as classes and other things. If you're interested, I do have a newsletter as well. That I haven't sent out in like a couple months, but I'll probably be sending out another one this month. This is where I'll announce new classes or just sort of like let you know about things that are going on with me. And then there's my website as well. So if you want to follow along and find more work of mine, you can do that as well. So cool. So thank you so much for class. Obviously, we're going to do a fun show and tell in just a minute. But I also have a class survey. So if you feel inclined to give me feedback, I really appreciate that. In the past, this class has changed quite a lot since I started teaching it a little over a year ago. In fact, one of the things that happened in the previous class was I taught this as purely 5 weeks of lecture, and people were like, we just want to see what everyone else made in the class. So that's how today's class is more show and tell. So I really do take the feedback seriously. If there's something that you felt I could have done better, something you wish I would have gone deeper on, if it was too fast, too slow, whatever it is, please feel free to give me feedback. It's really helpful. And that becomes a thing that I do for the next class as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you learned a lot and maybe found that you were really excited about this field, or maybe you find out that this is like kind of boring and disappointing to you, which is also a totally valid thing. But yeah, I was really happy to see everyone working on stuff, and I'm really excited to see some work in the next couple minutes. Any questions? Any other feedback? I think we'll have a little bit of time at the end because I know Claudio can't make this class. So we'll probably have a little bit more time at the end of class if there's additional questions. But anything that immediately springs to mind? All right. So why don't we let's take a little bit of a break because I have to go check to see what the hell was going on upstairs. So why don't we take like a 4-minute break? So we'll come back at 32 after. And I think, John, you're going to be the first person to share work. Cool. All right. I think we can get started here. So John, why don't you kick us off? So go ahead, share your screen and just walk us through some of the stuff you made.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks, Derek, for this course. I think I'm choosing the right screen. I think so. Let's try this one out. All right. Can you guys see a folder with some images?
Yep.
I'm not. I'm on my work computer, which is Windows-based, and I'm still not really all that used to navigating around. So yeah, I had a few different things. I'll try to kind of quickly go over, and of course, if anyone has any questions, feel free to shout them out. A couple of these things I had shared at one point on the Slack channel, so maybe some of you saw some of it. One of the first things I did that I got really excited about was the data set of Halloween masks. So I'd found a batch of about 600 images the first time I ran this. And I did a training session for about 6 hours. And then I actually I found another like amazing source of more images. So I ended up doing a second training. And I think the second time around, I had about 1,400 images. And I did a lot more sort of data cleanup, lots of it even manually with Photoshop. But I was really, really happy with the results. They're just kind of fun and creepy. Can you see this image? Is it showing up? Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Thanks. I wasn't sure if it's sharing like the screen or just the window there. So yeah, these were some stills taken from it, which were just, you know, about as terrifying as I would hope. And then with the video, I do lots of like analog video work. And I love processing things through some of this weird gear that I have. So this is an example. Let me bring the video down to that screen. Do a little juggle here. So this is just me doing a quick run through of like a latent walk through some of my analog gear. Getting some really kind of weird, fun visual effects from it. And I mean, it's its own look, but it kind of also, it kind of blurs and hides some of the faults, I think, of this style of image making. I thought that guy at the end was pretty creepy. So yeah, and then I was just playing around with video editing and like what, you know, thinking of ways I could take this with like multiple layers and stuff. And so I don't know, this for me was just kind of like a fun entry point. It got me really excited. And then last year I did a series of these like looping analog VHS, just like videos that were sort of part of a bigger art show, but I basically had this library of videos, so I thought it'd be cool to try to like split all the frames up and generate images from that. So one of the sets I had were all these plastic flowers that were just spinning on a black background. So I used FFmpeg to split up, I think it was like every 10th frame or something from the video, and spit it out and trained it. And then I started piecing together what I think eventually will probably turn into a music video for some music I was going to just independently kind of put out there at some point this year. And this was sort of like where I left off and just exploring the editing of these images. Pretty subtle, but I kind of liked it. It just sort of gave this really subtle hypnotic feeling to it. So I'm definitely going to explore that space a bit more, and on the video editing side, I think just kind of dig a bit deeper and try to push that a bit further. And then the next thing I dug into were plant. I found this amazing library of like over 5,000 plant illustrations. So I think it was the best data set I had found. So I had to, of course, try training this. These are some of the generated images that came out of it. I think the latent walk videos from this were really kind of, I don't know, just kind of like pleasing to watch. So I think that it's safe to say that like for me, like image quality wise, this was probably the best set or output. And I guess it's just mostly due to like the quantity and consistency of the images. Yeah, and then I was also, whoops, I was trying out some more like analog processing with this stuff as well. No, maybe that one is just normal. That's just another output. I think this one is analog. Just like kind of playing around with stuff on the fly here. And then, so yeah, and then that kind of took me to this very strange serendipitous moment like a week and a half ago where I do lots of like freelance video, like some video editing and sort of like, I don't know, music video making or visual making for different musicians. And I had this crazy opportunity come across my plate through a friend. It's sort of like a friend of a friend classic situation where somebody needed a hand. And I don't, it's a weird situation because I can't really like, I can't legally really go into any detail about it because of NDAs and whatnot. But it was like the perfect opportunity, I thought, to use machine learning because he referenced, so one of the art directors involved in the project referenced Stanley Brakhage, who was an old experimental filmmaker who I was familiar with. And I actually think, I'll show you a super quick clip. Can you see this window of the YouTube? So he just did like very rapid pace image making, which, you know, back in the late 60s was a pretty wild idea and concept. Lots of like, you know, insect wings and plant material and stuff like that. And this was one of the references that was thrown out visually, but of course it had a stupid timeline of like needed something for, it was actually like today was the initial deadline. So I thought like, oh, this is, I know how to get like data sets and generate an unlimited amount of images. So I ended up culling together some stuff, and I could probably like show at least one snippet of, this is just like one of the sets I did based on some rat tissue biology scans to kind of get a Stanley Brakhage sort of rapid frame image effect. But at the end of the day, doing it all with machine learning. So I sort of have my fingers crossed with this because this project is, it's not like 100%, but if it goes through, it will be a really, really cool opportunity for me. So I'm super excited that I got to learn a bit more and that like I had a very applicable use for, for some of the stuff I picked up along the way. And I think that's all about all I have to say. So yeah, thanks, Derek.
Yeah, of course. Any thoughts or feedback for John?
Was that last video that you showed, was that just straight from Runway?
Oh, sorry, let me open that up again. Let's see. I closed it. Where's my desktop? Darn Windows. Sorry, guys. This is the one. So the very last one from this one, I believe, let me see here what I named it. This one was straight from Runway. Yeah, this I did not process with any analog stuff. I did, of course, like I did some, I'll do a super quick snippet of this one. Some other tests that I ran through my analog gear. You know, just sort of exploring various outputs.
It looks really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, are the eyes from Runway too?
It was this stuff is processed with some of my analog gear, but the eyes were a data set that I created in Runway. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It looks great with the process.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I was happy to. I was always kind of excited to like, you know, just try pushing this through some other gear or channel to see like what else it can look like, I guess.
Was with the flowers, like with the music, is that just kind of like with some masking and After Effects or something? Like,
totally, yeah. Just I do almost all my editing in Premiere, and that was just using screening. It was like the screen opacity filter because like luckily since I shot all the original footage on a black background, it made for pretty good output. And then if you have a black background and you're familiar with video editing, you can just screen the hell out of it, and the black will kind of disappear to whatever you put behind it. So I love abusing that. And one other site, I guess I'll just mention as a tip, because I found it really helpful when I was doing some like bulk cropping. It's called what was it? Birme, B-I-R-M-E. I think I forget the extension on it, but you can bulk upload images and visually crop them. And like I was astonished at how quick it was to upload, crop, process, and download them. If you want a bit more visual control on cropping and resizing things. I'll post that link to the channel. I found that helpful for a couple sets I did.
Awesome. Yeah, really cool. Okay, let me see. Who is next here? So, Ben, you're next.
Yeah. Okay. So, of course, I had these grand plans for what I was going to start working on over this weekend. And then I was like, I'll have time to do it like beginning of the week before class. And of course, like work hit the fan. So I didn't do it, but I can talk about the ideas I had. And I did watch Groundhog Day, which I feel like is really a movie about machine learning. So that felt, you know, it counts for something. So like I do for like photography and stuff. And so I was thinking kind of from the beginning about like, because, you know, we talked about like, initially I was thinking about like collage and like 2D, like machine learning, like coming up with stuff, but then you kind of mentioned that, and from the examples that like flat, especially like vector stuff wouldn't really, like would kind of be weird. And I think like I can generate more like vector stuff and like a different, like this isn't the way to do it. So instead I was thinking about how could I create my own data set of like photographs, and I like in different ways and do that really quickly. And I'm moving, so I'm cleaning out random stuff. And I have like hundreds of feet of neon paracord. And I have a bunch of Play-Doh. And kind of like what John was talking about with like a black background and masking, I figure my plan would be to kind of set up like a little photo studio and do some like really quick like variations on like different colors and like Play-Doh things, maybe like black light or whatever, and then just kind of have like a remote going, and every like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, switch it up so I can create like a day that spend a day like making a set and stuff. And then I kind of like was thinking about that further, instead of me having to do it, of using like a simple motor or a fan or something to like maybe put something on like a spinner, or like somehow be like moving things around kind of like in that way. And then like running that through and then using kind of like masking and using it like a video or like cutting it out. And like, I don't know, kind of like seeing where to go from there. Yeah, so that's kind of just like my nefarious plans, I guess. Yeah, because initially I think like my original project where I thought it would be fun to do like a latte art maker thing is just like, I can kind of like see, I might mess around a little bit, but I don't necessarily think I'm gonna get exactly like what I want out of it, because the photos are all like not similar enough to be like kind of like what I was hoping for. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah, it may be worth for the latte art, you might want to look at the tool that John listed, which maybe lets you have a little bit, like a way to control a little bit more of that stuff if you're interested in it.
Yeah.
I have two thoughts. I'm gonna share my screen and show you one thing, which is I mentioned before that you know, flat vector art doesn't necessarily do what you expect it to, but that's not to say that it doesn't do cool things. So this is Esteban, who's taken a number of my classes before, and he makes all of his own data sets using flat vector shapes and things. And he trains them in StyleGAN, and sort of like, this is what they end up looking like.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's actually like kind of what I would want out of it. So that's great.
So what I think is cool is you get a little bit of this like photographic texture, but you still get some of the vector shapes. I'll go ahead and I'll add a link to his account let's see here. I think he changed it recently. But yeah, he's got a bunch of really interesting stuff, and almost all of his stuff has been using his own flat vector shapes. He like has some tools, like he's, you know, I think he'll tell you like he's not like a programmer or anything, but he uses like iPhone apps to generate a lot of these like shapes and assets, and then he feeds them through various training pieces. And you know, just some of these are like really, really interesting. You get like this really great depth out of some of these.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like again, I think it's like I think if people want realism out of these things, you're generally disappointed unless you have a ton of data. But if you throw like a lot of weird things at it, you still get some pretty interesting work. So just add his.
I think like depth, like Tyler was going with photography is like the depth, I think is like adds that element to it that I'm looking for.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that your comment remind me of is, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Okay, I'll probably blank on his name. But there is a really great machine learning artist who's based in London right now. And he made a piece a couple of years ago, which I before I went all runway, I showed as like an example of a really cool thing. And it was a model that uses pix-to-pix, which is like an image translation model. But he did this amazing thing where he had something as simple as like a cell phone power adapter and like a cord, and then like a piece of cloth. And he basically trained it to like, he used those shapes and manipulating those things with his hands. He was able to train a pix-to-pix model to do that. And then also like match it up with like photos of waves and flowers and other things. So like basically there's like a real-time engine where you like manipulate this thing live on a video camera and it converts it to like these beautiful scenes. I'll have to find the video. It's going to take me like 5 minutes or 10 minutes to like dig around in my files and find it. But just a really, really cool project that I'll link to. And I think like there again, it's sort of this idea of like, can you take weird stuff and like convert it to something else? Or like, you know, even I think the idea of just running like a weird sort of like photographic photo setup into other things are pretty interesting. And I think definitely worth trying, especially because, you know, I don't want to say Runway is cheap, but Runway is like, it's a good place to experiment without like knowing you have to like set up this entire environment and things. So I definitely recommend checking that out.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Who's up next? Grace.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I had previously used what's called Delftware, which is, I don't think, okay, here I go. These are like what I pulled from. So it's like this style of ceramics and pottery. And so I went through museum collections and just downloaded all of these photos. And I was thinking like, oh, should I do just plates? Because that's kind of a very flat surface, easy to do. But I decided to just put everything in and see what happens. And so this is what came out of it. I thought it was interesting how it like does the shapes and kind of, it has like these weird in-betweens, which is fun, but for the most part, it kind of recognizes it. And I can pull it up. So yeah, had a lot of fun with this and seeing what came out of it. Oh, wait. It kind of got spiderwebby, which I don't know if that's just how it processed it. I did it at 3000, so maybe it needs a little bit more time. But I'm still very happy with what came out of it. And like, it got really interesting with like these shapes and like how the patterns kind of took over. in a sense. And I thought it was interesting how it kind of also started to play with shadows a little bit. I don't know if they're like, and like how it like the vase and stuff like that. Like some of it feels like it's incorporating shadows a little bit, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, overall, very pleased with this. Very surprised too. But I guess it is worth the time, you know, cutting out the background and all that stuff because you get really nice results. So yeah, I started to play around a little bit. Oh, this was really cool. Just like how it took over by itself. Yeah, I thought this was really nice. It definitely got the blue, but I thought it was interesting that it pulled a lot of the orange too. Anyway, and then I started to play a little bit with like how, like turning it to black and white, which defeats the purpose of the blue, but I think it could make a lot of fun textures, and like pulling that into After Effects and using it as like displacement maps or something like that could be really fun. So I'm very pleased with how this turned out, and I think I want to explore like how charcoal could be something to play with, just like that black and white and that texture, I think would be really, really interesting. And then I trained it with the faces at the beginning, and you can kind of see where that is, which cracks me up. But yeah, overall, very pleased with how it turned out.
Cool. Any other feedback for Grace?
I think those would make for, I'm always a sucker for like prints. I just like prints, you know, printmaking as a format is a nice thing. And I think those would look really, really nice printed out in any shape. Like when you show the tiles in Runaway, that just looked like a really nice grid.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, yeah, some really cool results from that.
Yeah, and some of the collections had like the actual tiles that you could use to put into your houses. So I think that could be a fun, like a route to take down, seeing how they take the tiles.
Absolutely. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I might suggest trying to train it for a little bit longer just to see if it does. Because what I found really interesting was even in 3,000 steps, you're right, it got the silhouettes, which was really amazing. And I'd be interested if you gave it another like 3,000 steps or whatever to see if it would figure out patterns a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also love that it like, you know, the images of the real data you showed us were like very very ornate, but like it almost became like almost Islamic, like textural patterns and like more pattern based.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that some of that is just the way that StyleGAN trains is like, it's like a very much a pattern finder. So I thought it was, but I think it was really interesting. And I think the images you pointed out that were like almost purely spiral sort of textures were really, really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think there was also that pottery example that I shared before, but I think it's also like, I think it's fun to sort of see what other shapes might be a thing that come out of this, right? And I can almost imagine like, what if you like did like a really simple like 3D like shape, and then you applied these textures as textures on them, and it's almost like, it'd be really interesting to sort of see like what they could actually look like as actual pottery, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the displacement maps definitely sound like a cool idea too, like the idea of, like one thing I really like doing with this sort of stuff is like use the displacement map, but use a slightly earlier version of the video, and you like can actually displace your own textures, and it does some really interesting stuff.
Oh, wow.
Any other thoughts for Grace?
Oh, what were you talking about? Did you say something about using like charcoal with the black and white?
Yeah, that's what I want to explore next. Just because I had good results pulling from like art museums and collections. One idea I also thought about doing was, I can't pronounce her first name, but Kasuma, the artist who does all those dots, I think that would be really fun as well to explore.
Yeah, I think styles, like styles of paintings are like a really good thing to try to collect, or styles of art where they're like have a very clear graphic sense. I think it's really interesting to sort of see like what does the machine learning model pick up from them and what doesn't it. And I think you find like it often finds things that you had like you weren't expecting it to find. So I think there's lots of opportunity to play with things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, before we take yet another break, because sort of the day we're doing today, I thought I'd share, I did find this project I was talking about, which is Memo Acton's Learning to See. I don't think video plays that well over Zoom, but you can just sort of take a look here. And actually, this is a little bit of a different video. This is him with boxers, I guess. Oh, here, this is the video I was going to show. So this is where you'll sort of see it, and I feel like talking about it too much sort of ruins it. Let me just pop this out. So it looks like he has like many, many different versions of this, but also like he's got a fire version. He's got somewhere right here, he's got like a flower version. But what I love about this is just like how simple it is. Like he's just translating between two different like pretty simple images. This is, again, using a model called Pix2Pix, which you can't train in one way, unfortunately, but you could train it in like Colab or on a server. And I have some videos that cover that. So if you're interested in like maybe experimenting with this, you could always look at it. But yeah, I just really love like how simple this is and just using like household objects to create these really beautiful scenes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And this is from 2017. So I'm sure there's like even better versions of this today. But what I also like, I mean, kind of the funny thing about machine learning is like, I think the research is pushing toward these like realism, like lifelike things. But when it gets too real, it's kind of like either too weird. It's like that uncanny valley, or it's like kind of like, okay, like you could also just like record a video of flowers and like you would have that, right? I love that sort of like in between step where it's like still pretty mushy and like bit ratey and bit rotty and like, but it's still like he's doing this other thing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to like play with these things. And again, you know, the machine learning community is like so busy thinking about what the next best thing is that all this stuff, like all these materials, I would say even from like a year or two ago, have just sort of been like forgotten until like an artist comes along and says, I'm going to spend 6 months like exploring this thing and making some really cool work with a model that got like a week of press and that was it. So like, you know, I think even for us artists, like it's not like we need to be at the forefront of all this stuff. Like we can still play with old things and like find ways to make it work and like embrace sort of the constraints in a way that like artists and designers do really well, while the rest of the community like runs off to try to do like real time, like realism, like artifacting type of stuff. So yeah, I just really love that project. It's like one of my favorite machine learning projects. And I'm shocked that I couldn't remember Memo's name or the project name until I went back through my notes. Cool, let's take another little break. And then I think we've got a couple of people after we come back and then we'll wrap up for the evening. Cool, so see everybody in 10 minutes. All right, Michael, I think you're up next, right?
Cool, okay. Yeah, let me share my screen here. So I also got kind of swamped by work this week. So I didn't actually get a chance to finish what I was working on, but I wanted to kind of maybe talk more about this dog data set and model that I ended up training, and then maybe talk a little bit about the project I'm working on now. So I was kind of, I've been just like constantly playing with this thing because it's just like everything is so funny to me. But there's lots of little like weird artifacts that pop in. I kind of wanted to go through maybe a little bit of my data set and kind of explore why maybe. So I like aggressively cleaned some things up out of here, but you can kind of see like there's a pretty big variety of composition, especially as we kind of like scroll through this. You know, there's like, I think that in particular this dog is kind of good because like you know, her eyes and nose and mouth are pretty like high contrast right against her face, so I think it was like really able to like immediately find those even like pretty early in the model training. But then like the rest of the stuff, it sometimes gets kind of wild. But then like she's, you know, always wearing like some interesting scarves, or like there's this red leash that I think you can see show up in a lot of stuff, just like this, you know, red textural thing happening, or like she wears a lot of hats. And so there's just like all these strange accessories that pop up that just are really great. And also just because of her shape, like sometimes the image ends up being like more of like a almost a piggy kind of thing. So so I think what I kind of want to do next with all this stuff is you know, cut it out and sort of take like a digital collage approach to some stuff. Kind of would be interesting to maybe figure out how to do that automatically, or to, you know, to figure out how to not do it manually, but in a way like like some of the stuff, especially when there's some kind of novel anatomical features that pop out, I think it's probably going to be important to actually crop these myself, to like get these. I think what I'm going to be looking to get is like a pretty angular cut, but to still like keep some of this blobby anatomy intact. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of there. Maybe I'll do something with this website. But so far I've generated like, this actually ends up not really being all that expensive, right? Because it's like $4, but it's a lot of joy. And then also obviously, you know, I can use this to generate within Runway as well. But then the other thing that I was working on was a little different. I was working with a source of all 12 Debussy piano etudes. And the deal with these is like they're all pretty short, but they all like, each of them is like loosely centered around like a certain interval. And so there's like little different frequency content, I guess, like in terms of like frequencies in relation to each other. And so I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to maybe like figure out how to like blend these together and create like something out of them. So I'm sort of still in process of figuring out the entire signal chain. Maybe I'll post and get some help to try and iron out some of the problems. But essentially what I did is I like went through and sliced all these files up and like pulled out 2-second slices, and got turned those resultant audio files into like these spectrogram files. So in order to do this, it's first creating a frequency spectrogram. So across from left to right on like the x-axis here is time. So this represents 2 seconds worth of sound. And then vertically, the y-axis is like frequency. And so like this is pretty concentrated around like, you know, the piano frequencies, right? And it goes like as high as I guess like 40,000 kilohertz or whatever. But the idea here is that like there's a color mapping that happens. So it has like some color palette, and you can specify the color palette. So I was like playing around with that. But like these more intense colors are where like the frequency is focused. But then as you can see, like up the scale, there's like a lot of like subtle detail in here. This is like overtones in some of the sound. And so there's sort of like a different visual characteristic. It's sort of hard to tell. But if you look at like aggregates of these from like different different of the etudes, I think you can kind of see like visual patterns in there of like these different overtones combining. So I was really curious to see like, okay, how do I like get this in a format that I can translate back into sound. I think it ends up being pretty lossy, but I think in general, like what I was thinking is like, this is cool because you get an image out of this, and it seems like it would be interesting to kind of see, maybe some of these straight lines disappear and get it sort of wavy, and maybe use that almost as like a pre-compositional tool, kind of to get like to hear sounds and use those sounds as not just as samples, but almost like create a sound collage of like sounds that I'm pulling from a model that I generate with this, but then like actually write music over it basically. One of the things I was running into this was that it doesn't, because this is time based, because this represents like 2 seconds worth of a sound, I was like, oh, actually, I guess this doesn't really make sense to like, run a latent walk through a model, right? So I was kind of disappointed by that, realizing that. But anyway, basically, oh, I was already in here. Basically, where I'm at right now is I'm just trying to figure out like how to get this back in a form that I can handle. I played around with grayscale too, because it seems to be a little easier to do this color mapping correctly. But obviously, there's just like less data here in terms of like less color data, and I think it would probably be a lot less interesting to see like a model that's just operating across grayscale. So we'll see where I get this. I might I'll make sure and post the my continual experiments as this goes. But I thought it could be like a really like a different way of treating these images as actually like a sort of an interstitial processing medium. That's kind of all that I had.
Cool, awesome. Any thoughts for Michael, everyone?
I'm excited to see what you do. That sounds so interesting.
Yeah, I hope it turns out. I'm kind of curious to see like exactly how high quality the resultant audio will be, and if this will actually be usable, or if it's really just sort of a, like I say, like a pre-writing tool. But yeah, I'll make sure and share this.
I really like the range between the dog thing and then the music thing. It's like just such a diverse sampling of kind of outputs.
Yeah, I was also trying to figure out like how can I combine something more image oriented with this, but again, I think it ends up being maybe kind of a maybe not like a bad choice, but like a counterintuitive choice given like the time oriented nature of the spectrogram content. It's just like not really, you can't really play with it over time in the same way that you can with images. So
yeah, a couple of thoughts. One is if you're looking to do clipping masks of the dog, there is the machine learning model inside Runway that I believe is like remove background. You could try just throwing your images, like sending your images to that, and you get back a clipping mask.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably hit or miss, and knowing that you said you want maybe something a little more angular, it probably won't work as well as you would expect, but you might be able to like take that and maybe manipulate that image to like using some sort of thresholding or something, might be able to get something different out of it to play with. I've seen lots of people using that to do some really like interesting, I think there was a VR project I saw recently, which is like you would take a photo of something, it would then send it to the background masking system. So you would get back just the outline of the shape, and then you could sort of collage with that like in VR, which is pretty amazing. So like, again, there's a way to like chain some of these tools together to do some really interesting stuff. Spectrograms are really, really cool. And there's lots of things. I'm gonna post a link into the chat here. There's a student who was in Australia, I believe, who did a pix-to-pix spectrogram project. Here, let me share my screen real quick and I can sort of show you what this looks like. Where basically they took every bird, they matched the picture of a bird with the spectrogram that its song produces. And then they like trained this pix-to-pix, and then you could send any spectrogram to it and it would generate a bird from it, or like vice versa. So just some really interesting stuff. Again, I think like this is where pix-to-pix is really great, in that it's like you can combine two things and they make no sense whatsoever, but it like kind of tries to figure it out. So just some really interesting mapping. I think in the terms of like, you know, I know you said you didn't really want to do a latent walk. I think what you could do is you could do a latent walk and then maybe like grab every like 10th frame or something. So it's almost like, instead of like it's moving, it's more like you're taking sequences from a video, just like you are with sound. So you could try that and see if that would produce anything of value. I mean, with all the spectrogram stuff, it is sort of lossy and like you never know like what you're gonna get back, but that might be a way to maybe try to like create sequences from a latent walk rather than just like, you know, generating images or a movie from it. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
cool, awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, who is next? I have Reed up next.
Okay, hey, I'm going between my work computer and personal computer, so it's kind of a little bit of a struggle. Nope, it's gonna make me quit. Could the next person go and then I can go after that? If that's possible, I have to restart my Zoom thing because of some sharing things.
Sure, Anthony, I think you're the last person if you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So share screen. Sure. Okay. So I've got a couple of different things in progress, but no like final versions yet. First thing I'll show is I trained a model based on Eastern Orthodox iconography. And this was what the output was. And I kind of found from training like, not necessarily photorealistic paintings, but any kind of paintings, I was actually more interested in the textures that came out of them than the actual like representative images that resulted. So this stuff was a lot less interesting to me than something like just this, for example. So I kind of liked that it came out half-baked, but still need to kind of figure out how to control that a little bit more. So these were some of the ones that I kind of just pulled from that process. And then same thing, another time I trained a model on a bunch of nudes used for painting purposes. So like, I guess like just models, and really liked the goopiness that came out. I definitely need to up-res the photos. The data sets that I could find were pretty lacking in resolution, so you can see like a lot of different artifacting happening, but I'm really just liking the forms that are kind of getting extruded from this. And I think there's another one of these where the transfer actually kind of makes the form dance in a weird way, which was completely just, I was like, oh, that's awesome that kind of just incidentally happened. And then the last one I did, I have a friend who does furniture design. And so we were talking one night and we got really interested in this idea of using ML as a way of creating like a quick ideation over different chairs that we could eventually build. And so I trained a model on a bunch of different chairs, and this is how it came out. To train this, I actually ended up using, I can't remember what the name of the program is, Gigaplex? I can't remember, to up-res photos. I was mostly getting like thumbnails from like IKEA and Crate and Barrel and stuff like that. But the good thing about furniture is it's usually photographed very consistently. So you kind of have the same angle. And so I was able to train something that looked pretty consistent. I don't think we got quite the variety that we were hoping to get out of it, but we did get some interesting ones. I probably have to go through and kind of, this one's pretty cool. I don't like that looks like a real chair to me, but this is one of the ones that was generated. Actually, no, like these weren't the ones that were generated. I think these were the ones that were generated. Yeah, these are the ones that were generated. So yeah, just kind of soft forms, not a lot of hard edges, which is a cool style in general. Just mostly like cool jumping off points, but nothing super high res or high fidelity yet. So I might try a second round of training, maybe for more steps, just to increase the fidelity. Some of these are kind of cool just in terms of composition. I think that's like kind of a cool composition. But yeah, just a lot of good kind of beginnings, but haven't pulled anything all the way through yet. But that's about it.
Super cool. That I had a great like flashback memory with the religious painting series. I'm sure most of you saw it in the news a year or two ago. There was a woman that tried to restore an old church painting and just butchered it. And I had a you should try to sneak into some churches and try to put up some gilded AI generated imagery and see if anyone notices.
I wish I could set up like maybe I'll set up a site where it's like, badrestoration.com.
Yeah, but yeah, the patterns and the textures were super cool, and I thought the set of the nudes was like, that was crazy. That was just such a cool data set to work with, because it's something that as humans we can all relate to, but you can't make out what's going on. So it's that weird mental conflict of like, this looks familiar, but I don't know what it is. And I think that's a really interesting space to look into.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought the poses were hilarious in the nudes, because you could see like where they would draw and everything like that, like laying down and everything. And then I really thought the colors of the religious ones were so vivid, and like that red was really, really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was almost like a teratoma effect from the nudes. Like some of like the collections of like bulbous flesh. It would be interesting to try and like, or I don't know if it would be interesting, but it could be interesting to try and play into that and like introduce like masses of hair or like teeth or something, and see if you can get like a teratoma model.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty easy for this stuff to turn into like horror like scenes, like by nature. A couple of things this reminds me of that may be interesting projects you want to check out. First off, so one thing I think is really cool, a lot of stuff you might want to try, you can't do in Runway, unfortunately, but there's some really, I've recorded some videos for things. If you're interested in any of this, I can link you to some stuff on how to do it. There's a new technique. It's not really new. It's new in the sense that like someone actually did it, but it's like conceptually possible no matter what, where basically you can take two different style GAN networks, and you can take what's called the early layers of one, which represents the structures, and the later layers of another, which represents like textures and coloring, and you can sort of blend them together. So this guy, Justin Pickney, who's one of my favorite people on Twitter, and right now he's doing this crazy project of, but anyway, he's doing a project using this. But basically what this is those old like Edo era Japanese paintings. So he took the early layers from that, which give you the structures, and then he's applying like real photographic textures from humans using that FFHQ model to apply like a human texture to it. So you get this like cartoonish but 3D rendered look of things. He did a bunch of examples here. I did a couple with him on like adding, I think I've got somewhere in here is like a bone texture on top of humans, which looks really creepy. But he's currently really deep into this. Oh, here's, if you're interested in what bone looks like to human textures, this is what that looks like. Everyone has like weird dreadlock hair. But he also is doing this project right now where he's taking this and he's applying it. So it's called Tunify. It's a website. I'll link to the website after class. But basically, like you upload a photo of yourself, and then it like tunifies you like Pixar style. So again, it's taking this idea of like early layers of like a cartoon layer, and then applying like a skin texture to it. And then he trained another person that he works with trained a Pix-to-Pix model that learns your face to a representation of this. So like there's now like a cool little web app to like upload this. So there's lots of things you can do with StyleGAN outside Runway to really start playing with all the layers and the various things available within it. So there's some really interesting stuff. The other thing I wanted to show you is Scott Eaton's work. If you haven't seen Scott Eaton, you need to check out his work, where he takes figure like photographs of people in the nude, and he does figure drawings of them, and then he trains a Pix-to-Pix network to actually translate them. So he's able to draw this thing on the left, and it renders into this, and you see like these really crazy like illustrations where now he's able to draw stuff, and it basically gets skin texturized. Now, what's really cool about Scott, or like it makes us all look bad, is that he is a 3D artist, a figure illustrator, and he has like an insane photo lab. He has like an hour-long video of how he went through and produced these, and he basically brought in models, photographed every single person in the exact same lighting structure, and then did a drawing with them of each of them, like, and that was his training set. So like, you know, he was able to like step away for like a month and do all this and come back and make this amazing thing. Not all of us are ever going to be that lucky, but I think this is a really cool example of like just the power of this stuff, especially if you have control over your entire data set. Like right. He shows an example where like he was taking stuff he found on the internet and like was like using that as his data, and he realized that because all the lighting wasn't perfect, it was getting like rendered in different ways. So once he like brought everyone into a photo studio and like perfectly photographed everyone, he was able to get this like perfect lighting texture where even like there was like an hour-long video of him demoing this, which is insane, where if he adds like even a little couple lines here to like sort of implied like texture or lighting or shading, like it shifts the whole lighting structure. It's insane. But like, again, like this is a case of where like someone with like the perfect set of skills for this material was able to combine all this stuff into a really cool project. But definitely I'll link to he's got a really great video where he like walks through his entire process, which is really amazing and makes you very jealous that he has all of that available to him at one time. But yeah, really cool stuff.
Awesome.
All right, Reed, are you set up there?
Yeah, I should be good to go now.
Cool.
Okay. Ooh. Should be good at this by now after however many months of quarantine. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of working with a data set that maybe it's not the best, but it's fun and will be a nice gift to my friends. I think I shared some of it last week, but it's basically photos from my friend's party that they've been doing for 10 years. So they have like 10 years worth of photos. Just like a quick sample. It's just, they're like party photos. It's like they put out Polaroids at the party to give everyone and people take pictures and stuff. But so when I first started training it, I didn't do any like curation of the data really at all. And it kind of gave me weird output. I also didn't download all the photos because on their website, they have like, I don't know, it's like 50 parties or something. And this was just a random sampling of it that didn't really work out so well. And then I went through and downloaded all of them and kind of curated it. I think that I'm going to do another pass eventually where I like try to curate them even more to get better results, hopefully. But it started to work a bit better in this one. And I don't know what's up with these glasses, but they show up in almost every one. It's like really kind of strange. And I have a friend who wears glasses like that, and I don't know if it's like actually him or if it's coming from the base faces model, but it like I can't really get it to leave. So I might have to like remove some of those images or something. But I'm happy with where it's getting to. Like if you've been in this place, you can tell that it's like the room. But this is I ended up doing 2,000 extra steps training, and this is what came out of that. And the glasses, it's almost like doubled down on it even more. So I've thought about like trying to train it a few more because it does look like it's getting better, but also worse at the same time. But I do really like that you can see the kind of like photographic quality of it, like a shitty disposable camera with a flash on, like the colors and the lighting all really like feel reminiscent of it. So I'm happy with that part of it, but I don't know. I'm pretty excited going forward to work with a different data set that maybe is a bit more like prone to this kind of work, but I'm going to print some of these out and give them to him as a gift just for fun, even though a lot of them are just pretty psycho images like this that don't really work but are fun. And if you know what it is, you'll know what it is. So I don't know. That's basically where I'm at with this project. But yeah, these glasses are just so weird. And I think it was interesting hearing you talk about how there could be different like categories because the data set, there's like a lot of pictures of just one person or like groups or two people. And so here it seems like it's like blending one person and two people with maybe even someone in the background or something. Or these kind of like, this is obviously just one person, but it didn't work. And there's maybe like facial hair here, but the hair itself looks really good. So there's just interesting qualities to see. It's just like a fun experiment, but I definitely am looking forward to in the future finding a bit more of a pointed data set that will hopefully provide a little bit better results. That's basically all I got for this.
That's a super cool gift, I think, to give your friend. And yeah, I think the images for what they are look super cool. Like it's to get like a kind of a non-representational, but representational, you know, depending on how strong the LSD is at the party, it might be very representational. I think it's a pretty cool gift.
Someone told me, they're like, this is how I remember the pictures, but I kind of would rather look at them this way.
Exactly. There you go. Perfect then.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a club party in the time of COVID, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I think this is great, and I think you know, this is a perfect example of sort of like the areas where StyleGAN really struggles, which is that like, you know, if StyleGAN wants like very consistent structures. So for portraits, like if you had everyone standing in the exact same position, like it would do a much better job of sort of recognizing overall body structure and those sort of things. But because it sees bodies in different places, it's trying to like merge them into a shape that it understands. And it sort of just like creates these sort of things. So I did record a video 2 weeks ago, last week, whatever, sometime in the past month, because time doesn't really matter anymore, of a way. So Runway, their most recent training model that they released is a model that allows you to do object detection. And I released a video showing how you could use object detection to find faces or to find, in my always use case of cats, finding cats in particular faces. So I labeled a bunch of images with like, this is a photo of Pudge, this is a photo of Bone Bone, this is a photo of this other cat. And then I like trained it to like find all of them in a huge data set of images. And then what I'll be recording a video on in the next week or so is how to take that training data and then crop in on those particular faces. You can actually kind of do that in Runway, but it will generate different sizes of images. So you could take that if you wanted to like do like a face detector, you could detect faces and then crop around those bounding boxes and then do another training. And that would just like train on faces and it would probably be much more consistent. Or you could sort of be like, this is a body, this is a body, this is a body. And it might like, it would be better than this, but like not as good as like realistic like faces. So there's a lot of tools you can start to build up to like build a whole data set sort of ecosystem to sort of like help with some of these issues like this. But I think to your point, it's really great that you can like, if you've been to one of these parties, you're like, yeah, that definitely looks like the venue. And like, that's what I remember of all these photos before, but it's also like not, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think there was a couple, I like left in a lot of group shots, and I think if I go, because I was kind of like trying to get a big data set, but I think if I try to make the data set just a little bit more focused, I might try running it one more time to see if I get a better result. Because I was like struggling with like, what do I include? Because I like wanted it to feel diverse, or like there's like different ranges and stuff, but I think I'd be better off cutting it down more and having things that are more similar looking, or like the same amount of people or something.
Yeah, and I think actually, Anthony, one of your questions around like these all look like realistic chairs or they're pretty smooth. I do think Runway has tweaked some of those StyleGAN parameters. So like, I've never actually asked the folks, but like they're not necessarily like cagey about the StyleGAN model, but they've definitely tweaked the StyleGAN model to do certain things different than the base model that you might use elsewhere. I think they've tweaked it so that it does a better job of promoting realism. So I think in the case of those chairs, it's like you get like pretty realistic chairs. In the case of this, it's like you get pretty realistic face structures, but I wouldn't be surprised if that also is like kind of like, we would describe this as overfitting or like finding a certain like area or region that it really likes. It might have found that those glasses and that face and like sort of like overcorrected toward that. So it's also a case of where like you might want to train this outside Runway and see if you get different results. Actually, Anthony, what I was going to say is one thing you look at is in other versions of StyleGAN, you can actually do flips. So you can flip all your images or like do a like flip left to right, top, bottom. You could try that. If you want really weird chairs, you could like throw a bunch of like different angles of chairs at it, and it's going to try to mash them all up, and you might get like legs poking out in weird ways. So that's also like, if you want to go all in on these being weird, there are ways to like push it and make it even weirder. And it's just sort of like, you sort of start to learn like, you almost get an innate sense after doing like 10 of these models, you start to get an innate sense of like, sort of like, okay, if I do this tweak, it's going to like do this to it or that sort of thing. So there's lots of things you can do to like make this stuff weirder. If weird is what you want, it's much harder to be like, I want realism. How do I get that without a big data set or without like a perfectly like manicured data set?
Very cool.
Cool.
Awesome. So also I want to mention that Claudio, who couldn't make class today because he was in another class, dropped his sort of the work that he made in the channel. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. There's some cool stuff in here. It looks like he also like took some of his materials and brought them into like posters and some other like images and other things. So there's definitely some interesting work about like sort of taking this and like manipulating stuff even further. So I want to recommend that like all of you like share your work in the, there's a share projects channel in the Slack channel. Please like feel free to share stuff there. All this stuff is really, really cool. And I think other people would really get a kick out of sharing it. So please share it there. Also, if you want to share on either Instagram or Twitter, you can tag me. I'm happy to like retweet your work and like share it. Cause I think again, all this stuff is really cool. So please like share and like talk about it. Cause I think it's exciting to see people like working on this stuff. One last thing I forgot to like really do a lecture on, but I want to talk about really quickly is, let me show Runway. If you want to, the share projects channel is this one. So please feel free to add there. And then, so let's say you've made a model and you really think it's cool and you just like want to share it with the community. Let me show you how to share and make a model public really quickly. So in your models, I'm just going to share, I find Bone here. Cool, so let me find Bone. So if you come over here and you go to view info, so basically you want to be on your info page for the model. If you come over here and you just, there's now a model visibility, which is private. If you want to share it with the Runway community or make it available to other folks to play with, you can just go ahead and click make model public. And you can just go make public, and it will basically then start to appear in the models file. And if you go to sort by, I think probably like new. It's kind of messy because like I've got all these other things that I've trained in here. But you might be, it'll probably show up like pretty early and make it public. So, you know, feel free to share if you're like really excited about it and you want to see other people play with it. I tend to find that like after a month or two of messing with my own model, I'm just sort of like bored with it, and I just want to share it with other people and let them play with it. But then it's like kind of fun because you get to see what other people have made with the thing. So just want to say you can make your models public. I'll also say if you feel like you made a really cool data set and you want to share it with the community or something, please let me know. I'm happy to like put it up on I can host it on my drive if you want other people to download it. I can also make it available to other folks if you're interested in that. And lastly, Justin Pinkney, who I was talking about, who did that really cool Tunify model, also has, see if his GitHub is linked to from here. Yeah, so he has a repository of StyleGAN 2 models that people have shared with him. So again, I would say like if you're interested in like sharing your interesting model file, you can, there's a way to just like send this to him either over a form or like doing a PR request if you know what that is or want to do that. Again, sharing your models with folks is like a fun way to like see what other people make with it, and also like lets other people use it in the community for other purposes. So if you're interested in that, like there's no requirement, like that is totally up to you and what you want to do. But I just want to say like if everyone has made really cool stuff, so if you want to share it, you're more than welcome to share it with Justin or with the community inside Runway. Awesome. So that is pretty much it for class. Was really excited to see everybody. Everybody made some really awesome stuff. I know that it's like definitely everyone has full-time jobs and this is a weird time to be working. So don't feel bad if you didn't get as far as you wanted to, but just like really good to see everybody's work. And I hope you'll continue to post in the Slack channel. Check out some of those videos I linked to of my other classes. And if you have questions, you're always welcome to DM me or like just post messages in our Slack channel, either our private channel or in the Slack as a whole. Yeah, it'll be really, really good to see everybody keep working on things. Any questions before we wrap up for the day? All right.
I was actually
go for it. Yeah.
When does that next class pick up? You mentioned one that was happening.
Yeah, the StyleGAN class I think is starting October 11th, and I think I've got 2 or 3 spots open for it. The links are in that slide deck, so if you just want to go through there. Also, I'll post a link to it in our chat as well. Yeah, so it'll be September 11th or October 11th, and it's Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's like an hour and a half. It's like a class like this length. So yeah, if you're interested in that, that'll be there.
That's good.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening, and I hope to see you around Slack or the internet. Please feel free to message me or DM me at any point if you need anything. All right?
That's great.
Cool.
Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This is a really great class.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
All right, bye, everybody.